Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we are looking at two tweets from POTUS, one on February 14th and the other one on February 15th. Trump tweeted on Valentine's Day, trying to use the 25th Amendment to try and circumvent the election is a despicable act of unconstitutional power grabbing, which happens in third world countries. You have to obey the law. This is an attack on our system and constitution. This was a quote from Alan Dershowitz at Tucker Carlson.
Now that's a beautiful one, because right now we have Andrew McCabe, liar, 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 fighting with Rod Rosenstein, liar, 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 and they're calling each other liars. So who do you want to believe? Well, we also have James Baker, and as we said, he'd be the first domino to fall behind closed door leaked information stating that, in fact, Rosenstein didn't say it once. He said it over and over and over again. He wanted to wear a wire and get Trump saying crazy stuff so that they could use the 25th Amendment to say that he's nuts and get rid of him. But as we heard, Mike Pence said no one ever approached him. No matter what happens, 25th Amendment without the vice president, it don't go. The whole cabinet could vote against the president, but if the vice president says no, it won't happen. So that was showing the sheer insanity that they had at the moment when Andrew McCabe was made the interim head of the FBI, and he started immediately the next day a criminal investigation, which is criminal, against the president for obstruction, which is stupid. Anyone, any lawyer, anyone would have known it impossible to have obstruction of justice, especially in the case with Comey. So that's what Trump is. That's why he posted that there. And what Dershowitz is saying is essentially these two are fighting against each other over their false claims. But actually, both of them, Rosenstein and McCabe, have made contrary statements both in public and also on the record.
Well, no, Thomas, we have been saying this for quite some time. We early on called this out as treason, and we got quite a backlash from folks who said that we were being too extreme. Well, we're not. The problem is that a lot of people are still asleep with this Tavistock programming and this brainwashing that's been going on. So many of you are quick to call out and say, well, maybe it was just a lapse in judgment for McCabe and Rosenstein, and you're giving them all kinds of excuses. We simply cannot do that. We have to stay strong. We know that Hillary has committed egregious criminal activities across the world, and we all want to see her in prison. But if we don't have the guts to stand up and call out Rosenstein and McCabe as the traitors that they have demonstrated to be, we're not going to be in a position to take out some of the bigger guys that are roaming our planet and causing utter destruction. So if you think for 1 minute that this was a lapse in judgment, may I suggest you go back and read some of our reports to see, no, indeed, it was planned. And by the way, I still want those page struck text in full to see if they were planning an assassination. The reason I say that, Thomas, is because to use the 25th Amendment would mean the president would have had to been incapacitated at some point. So was the incapacitation going to be what these two lubbers were planning?
Oh, easily. And when we talk about McCabe and his lying, they called it a lack of candor. So McCabe got out with his book and started his interviews before the book has been released. Just like Comey, just like Donna Brazile, these are their alibis, folks. This is like Glenn Simpson's testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee, which was released by Dianne Feinstein. Behind closed door testimony, released to the public. That's the alibi. And now their alibis clash. But let's remember, all three of them have been fired. They're liars. They weren't fired. I mean, you know how hard it is to get fired working for the federal government when you're at a top position like that? You have to be a monster to be fired. So don't, for any reason, give any justifications to Rosenstein or McCabe, as Betsy has said. Don't even think it. Their crimes, don't get me started on the 5 investigations of McCabe, none of which have followed through.
But see, what is so horrific is that we see what the plan was all about when Obama was talking about transforming America. They've got millions of invaders ready to hit our southern border. You know, we have the collapse of our sanctuary cities and states and all of the stuff that's going around. If Hillary had been in office, this would have just been a tap on one little domino, and it was all in place, and we would no longer be the United States of America the way that we think that it should be. So these people are part of destroying your life as an American citizen. This is treason, and yes, in America, a penalty for treason is death. So you need to be big boys and big girls and look at this for what it is.
And that's why they're so desperate and making so many mistakes to cover their tracks. That's why Mueller is the most guilty of all the people for what he's looking for. Conspiracy with Russia, that would be Mueller. 10 years he and McCabe had conspiracy with Russia over Uranium One. Election meddling, he was the guy directing it. Please, Comey was the guy directing it through the Global Engagement Center. But you can bet that every single step that Comey took was made in collusion and in counsel with Mueller before Mueller was ever appointed special counsel, because they are as close as you can possibly be. Just follow their biographies, which we've made available for you, and you will see that they are basically twins.
Okay, so the tweet that we want to focus on today is, of course, the speech that Donald Trump gave on the national security and humanitarian crisis on our southern border. So I'm going to back off and let you have at it. Folks want to know what your opinion is of what you saw.
Well, first off, we had said that he doesn't need to have another national emergency. Now, the way that he did it is he linked it with that and a statement of what he's going to do for national security with the military, where he's going to get the majority of the money. But this is a big question, so we got to frame this in a big way. First off, the Democrats lost. They said not $1 would be given for the immoral border, barrier, wall, whatever. They gave $1 billion. About $1 billion for. So what's going to happen? That is going to be used in the court case. As Trump said, yes, he said he's doing this, the national emergency. They can't stop that. They can't stop the fact that there's already a current national emergency for human trafficking and opium and drugs coming across the southern border. He didn't need a second one. So if this one's contested, it doesn't matter. He already has one on the books that he's acting on, and he's been building the border since 6 months into his administration. We've told everyone this. No one seems to notice. He never needed the Congress's money. He never needed this new national emergency. And as he said at the end of his speech, I'm going to continue to build the wall. I've been doing it all along. Nothing's going to stop me. And he didn't tell the full truth, which we told you from the beginning, that his defense budget at any moment could be turned into defending the southern border. And you know what it takes? It takes a nod from a general to take the money that he's going to use, the $8 billion. So he said that 2 or 3 generals simply said, oh no, we have discretionary funds. We were going to do this or that, in terms of building more defenses for our 186 military bases throughout the world, which don't need any, they need to all be drawn back to America. And so as he is pulling the soldiers back, it actually releases tremendous discretionary funds. So he simply asked a few generals, and the generals said, as he said in his speech, Donald Trump did, that the general said, oh no, this is much more important. The security of our southern border is a higher national security issue than anything else going on. Why? Because also in his speech, he pointed out, because he gave a presser and he talked about North Korea and China and all these things, and he pointed out and finally said the truth, that he sat in the Oval Office and basically Obama said he was 1 inch away from going into a massive war with North Korea. Well, that's what would have happened had Hillary come to power, as well as she would have attacked Damascus and started the war, the Armageddon War in Levant. So he revealed this today. And he also revealed that, Japan has put him up for the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, so has South Korea, by the way, and so have numerous members of Congress, of the United States Congress. And
I'd love to see Vladimir Putin second that nomination.
And yes, and that'd be beautiful.
Wouldn't that be beautiful?
And the other thing is that he mentioned that Obama, when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, literally asked, what did I do for it? And if you go back to what he did for it,
Well, they need to take it away from him.
It was a nuclear summit, and as I always point out, in that nuclear summit, Obama and Hillary gave $400 million to build Russia a uranium enrichment plant. While they're trying to... Well, he got an award for basically stopping nuclear proliferation. The fact is, no, they developed nuclear proliferation, probably more than anybody else. Now, and they did not decrease the size of dismantled missiles, and they didn't do anything. So when it comes down to it, Trump was admitting a number of things today. So he wanted to basically diffuse the concept of the national emergency because there are they've already been, many of them, and most of them are still on the books, and he's pointed out in his talk when he announced this that he's going to be using a previous national emergency of Obama's to carry through with attacking the cartels and war against the cartels, because that's really also the other issue, which is not being mentioned, which is we are at war with Mexico. But Trump also said amazingly good news, because it is really the invasion of the southern border that causes the national security issue. The humanitarian issues of gangs, of human trafficking, of drugs, that's another issue. So you can get money to fight the cartel, money to fight the drugs, money to secure our country, money for a national security emergency, money for a national security issue, money for immigration laws that aren't being enacted, money for ICE, money for law enforcement, money for Homeland Security. There is at least $20 billion he has that he can use that he does not have to ask Congress a single thing about. So he tricked them. This was how they lost the 2020 election.
Okay, so getting to that point, what do Pelosi and Schumer make of this? How were they trumped?
Because he publicizes everything. Normally, the leadership of both parties can get a press conference at the drop of a hat, and they come out and they tell their lies, and then that causes the other leadership to either come out and tell the truth, and then they tell the lies, or back and forth. And so the Uniparty, here's the deal, the Uniparty voted, and the Uniparty said, we support you, Mr. Trump. Matter of fact, I was shocked, because I went through the entire the condensed version of the bill. The bill's 1,167 pages, but I went through the condensed version of it very, very carefully, looking for the qualifying words that the lawyers will use in the Ninth Circuit challenge, which probably will be the Ninth Circuit, and then the appellate challenge, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court. And as we said, that's what the Ruth Darth Vader Ginsburg is all about. Sasquatch. Sasquatch wasn't seen lately twice. That's a lie.
Can we stop right there? Because I do have a link in the narration notes, okay, with the NBC report and some Breitbart reports, and it's really awful. On the 15th, they started pushing out this article that the Ruth Bader Ginsburg has returned to work, and it says the Supreme Court says. Well, what does that mean, the Supreme Court says? Is that an official spokesperson? If that is, do we have a press release? Do we have a name? No, we don't. We have here is fake news. And NBC and even Breitbart continues their articles by saying this. Ginsburg made her first public appearance since the surgery last week when she attended a musical account of her life. She did not. There was no sighting of her. There was just a bunch of rumor and innuendo. And then they base a story on this? No, they are desperate for us to think that Ginsburg is alive. Now, why is that?
Because it's going to go to the Supreme Court. They're going to challenge his... And the deal is they can't, and as he said in his speech, they can't challenge Trump for causing and declaring a national emergency. That's his job. Okay? So they're going to try to pick it apart to say that there is no crisis, there is no national emergency. They're going to try to fake that with fake numbers, and that's why the fake news during this presser asked fake questions with fake numbers and threw out fake statistics, which Kirstjen Nielsen, sitting right there, has given us the statistics through the law enforcement, through ICE, through the states. No. We have actually... Trump keeps saying we're doing a good job stopping them. Well, not really. We actually have more people invading this country than ever before at this moment. The numbers are actually up. And with the caravans coming up, as he said in his talk, in the questions in the presser, he said that the caravans, the multiple caravans that are on their way, are being broken up. And so that's because Mexico doesn't want another Tijuana. Why? Because the border, the wall built at Tijuana, reinforced with the National Guard, with the military, with barbed wire, and with closing the border entry, caused Tijuana to go into a state of
Why
crisis.
can't they use some of that El Chapo money to build a nice, solid southern border on Mexico's southern border?
Well, even though he looks horrible with his new beard, Mr. Cruz has a brilliant idea to take the $18 billion seized that we have now in our treasury, seized drug money from El Chapo. Now, when Obama seized money, whether it was from a SEC fine, that didn't matter. Wherever there was money, that he gained money, he turned around and gave it to non-government organizations that are funded by George Soros. This is a fact. They won't let Trump do anything with it. The money already gained from the tariffs from Mexico could have built the border already.
Who's the they? Who's the they that won't let Trump have the money?
Congress.
Okay, I just want to make sure, when we use
That's the
pronouns,
House.
we have to kind of sometimes label them so
That
people
would be
follow.
Paul Ryan
Okay.
and Nancy Pelosi, who might as well be the same person because Paul Ryan was a rhino and Nancy Pelosi is a complete idiot
No, he was
obstructionist.
a globalist piece of... Okay.
Nancy Pelosi is a bought and paid for Mexican agent. Okay,
Yes.
Mitch McConnell is a Chinese agent bought and paid for, just like his wife. Paul Ryan was a globalist bought and paid for by George Soros. Hillary Clinton bought and paid for by Soros. Bernie Sanders, Obama bought and paid for by Soros. Look at who puts up the money. We got to stop the election campaign funding fraud. We got to get these corrupt politicians out of being paid with their offshore accounts. Now, let's go back to what Trump did. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. By the way, we did predict this, except we did not predict that he would declare the national emergency. But his national emergency had already been declared. He just used one more extra word called humanitarian. Why? Because he sat back. And first off, he baited them. He let the government close because he wanted to have the 2020 election determined now, when Nancy Pelosi, the idiot, comes to rule the budget. Because that's where the fights happen, is with the budget. Okay? So he let the closing of the government happen and let it go on all that time while they were off on Hawaiian beaches and beaches in the Caribbean and so on and so forth, because they don't care. They don't care about federal employees. They don't care about immigrants. They don't care about DACA. They don't care about borders. Obviously, the only thing they care about are letting the drugs come across, human trafficking, making sure immigration never gets straightened out, making sure to get their cheap labor, and making sure to get their votes, because we know at least 3.5 to 5 million votes were from illegal aliens, and that's why Hillary won the popular vote. Once we stop that,
Well, in the end, she didn't win the popular vote. Listen, let's go back to Ginsburg. So why is this important, all this Ginsburg stuff on the Supreme Court right now?
they need that vote. They need her vote to go Democratic, or else they're
Right,
going to try
because-
to stop Trump. And if this will be their moment to get their justification for impeachment, if they can vote against something that Trump did in relationship to this, which, by the way, there is nothing. And he even tricked them with the wording of this national emergency and the second part of it, which then basically just said it was nothing more than reinforcing the previous national emergency and reinforcing his authority to use his Department of Defense budget the way that he and his generals decide to, especially with discretionary funds. $20 billion of discretionary funds, which can be used anywhere. And thank you, Mr. Obama, for allowing posse comitatus to be suspended in America, because you allowed the National Defense Authorization Act to allow the DOD to be active in America. And so now Trump doesn't even have to do that. That's already done. He can bring back all the troops into all the world and put them on the border if he wants.
That's great.
So what he has done here was the most beautiful political move, because he said he pressured them where he played like a possum. He played like, oh, Nancy, oh, Schumer, oh, power, power, power. I can't get them to agree. Oh, look, I can't get them to get the vote that I need. So he let 4 specific bills, actually 6 bills, because Paul Ryan put forth 2, 6 bills not get through, and played like that really affected him. He didn't need those bills to get through, and he doesn't need this one to get through. The only reason he's signing this one is because it basically sinks the Democratic Party, because they all lied, didn't they? They all said not $1 for the border wall, a barrier of any sort, and they gave 1.4. They're liars. It shows that they're going to lose. They're going to lose because Trump's base went from 52% support, remember, add 10 to 15 points, to probably 100% support of those of his base, and half of the Democrats.
You know, there's another issue that's percolating up to the Supreme Court right now, and this is the census question and whether you can ask someone if they're a citizen. Dabney Frederick upheld it and said, yes, you can ask citizenship. That's been bumped up now to the Supreme Court. Well, without Ruth there, the vote would be perhaps 4-4. I mean, we all know that Roberts is a scumbag. He'll vote anything that his masters tell him to do. And our question is still out with Kavanaugh because we know he was SES. But that leaves the court in a very precarious situation. So they've got to keep Ruth, or at least us thinking that Ruth is alive, because, we don't want to count the illegals and they want to. That having been said, we as patriots out here, we have to do our part and help flush out this Ginsburg situation. We've been recommending that you call the Supreme Court, call them. We know the calls are being made. We get reports back on how frustrated it is for the people at the other end answering our phone calls. The other contact you can make is with Lindsey Graham. He's a head of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and he should be very concerned about where a missing Supreme Court justice is. So if everybody could get out there and make those phone calls, make those emails, our voice is being heard.
Now, going back to a remark I made, the issue at the Supreme Court will be something to this effect. He sounded them out by signing the national emergency before he signed the bill. Why? Because once he committed pen to paper on the national emergency, then Pelosi, Schumer, Ocasio, and all the rest of the nuts will come out and start to show their hand, because they're idiots. And this is what they do every time. They don't get that he pisses them off on purpose to find out what their intent is. This is what you do when you're a martial artist. You get your person angry, they lose. The minute you're angry, you lose. They're angry. Okay? So he sounded them out. And what did he hear them say? Well, after he saw their bill, he knew how to write the emergency executive order. Why? Because they increased funding in all areas but 4. And 3 of them didn't matter. One of them was the wall. But they said they wouldn't give $1, and they gave $1.4 billion. But in all other areas, as he said in his speech, thank you. You gave me more money than I can spend for the humanitarian crisis at the border. Why did he keep saying that? Because that's the language he used in the national emergency after he saw the bill's language, so that he can know what would be the language that the court is going to use against him. And so he used it against the Democrats. He didn't declare an invasion and a national security emergency, which they could have contested. He declared a humanitarian crisis. And the humanitarian crisis has now been substantiated by the Democrats providing more money for humanitarian crisis on the border than ever before. So in other words, he got them on a dozen issues to give money to things that are going to be the very issue that will go to the Supreme Court, which will be the crux of the matter on whether or not the Supreme Court will vote in his favor. But they will vote in his favor because he has every right to do what he said. At what he did. He has every right to do that. And he, by the way, he's going to continue to do it as of today, as the moment that he signed that, on forward. The $1.5 million that he already had, which he was negotiating for the building of the wall during the shutdown, and now the 1.4, that's going to basically complete a lot of it. And as he said, he's reinforced every single piece of the border that had anything there to reinforce. How did he reinforce it? He used the Fence Act. He used the money that has been sitting there by presidents who gave nothing but lip service and rhetoric to the border. They even passed legislation. They even appropriated the money, and it sat there. So he was, from 6 months into his administration, reinforcing the border in every way possible. And now he admitted it for the first time ever. There's no other parts of the fence to be reinforced. And he says, and we took really bad parts of the fence and we reinforced them so well that no one can get through. So they're not a wall, but you can't get through them. And so what did he just say? He said the rest of the wall, the money that he's got, once that's installed, it's done. It's done. And then he has more money than he asked for the ports of entry, for drug scanners, for ICE agents, for everything. They upped it. How did they think that that was a good idea? Because then that means that they voted, so therefore voted for it, so it can't be illegal, so it will pass the Supreme Court. Thank you, genius president. You are a very stable genius. And when you look unstable, it's because you're playing your enemy with the art of the deal. And I just love watching it because it's just a huge joke. Remember when he...
It's not a joke. It's watching the master work his chessboard.
Well, the joke I'm talking about is the joke of Obama and Clinton giving $4.5 billion to North Korea, watching them build up their whole nuclear arsenal, watching them build breeder reactor plants, watching them get the enriched plutonium, enriched uranium, and did nothing about it because they wanted a war with them. That was the joke that we ever for a moment believed Obama. Obama was leading us towards the annihilation of America. He hates America. He's not an American, and he never will be an American. No, I don't care that he sat in the White House.
Michelle will never be a woman.
Correct. And Barack Obama will never have children because he and Rahm Emanuel and his whole group, his 3 boyfriends beforehand, and so we know all about this. So what we were talking about is the joke of Obama saying that North Korea was our enemy, we gave them that. The joke of Hillary saying Russia was our enemy when we gave them the reset button. We gave them Skolkovo, which is now finally being reported in the news. We gave them their tech city. We gave them all the advanced weapons, which now we have to compete against because our military-industrial complex contractors work for Russia too. Hillary insisted that Raytheon build a plant in Russia to build hypersonic missiles, folks. We keep telling you this. I don't understand why so many people are so asleep. But wake up, because the reality is shocking.